Cleveland Browns fans have been through it all. Decades of heartbreak, false promises, and seasons that collapse before they even start. But this year was supposed to be different. For the first time in a long time, there was real electricity in the air, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the Browns finally had their spark. That spark had a name: Shedeur Sanders. This wasn't just another draft pick. Shedeur was marketed as a franchise changer, a quarterback with not only the talent, but the swagger to finally break Cleveland's curse. The city was ready. Fans lined up for jerseys, local bars packed out during preseason, and there was this unshakable belief that the Browns had finally landed a player worth building around. But then, out of nowhere, came the gut punch. The Browns announced that Jacoby Brissett, a steady veteran, but hardly the future, would be the one taking the snaps. Shedeur Sanders, benched. Buried on the depth chart before he even got a real chance. And here's the kicker. This wasn't just a coaching decision. Reports started surfacing that Browns owner Jimmy Haslam himself was furious that fans weren't all in on the team anymore. Think about that. The man at the very top, upset at the fans, while the one player fans wanted most is sitting on the sidelines collecting dust. It's not just confusing, it feels like betrayal. It feels like Cleveland got teased with the future, only to have it ripped away for reasons that no one can fully explain. And the fans? They've noticed. They're not just frustrated, they're starting to fight back. Because this story isn't just about a quarterback not playing. It's about something deeper. Control, power, and whether the Browns care more about protecting their image than actually winning. And once you see what's been happening behind the scenes, you'll understand why fans believe this is more than a benching. They believe it's a cover-up. For a city like Cleveland, hope doesn't come easy. Decades of broken promises and false dawns have left fans hardened, almost numb to disappointment. But when Shedeur Sanders' name entered the conversation, something shifted. Suddenly, there was a different kind of energy in the air, the kind of buzz that can electrify an entire city before the first snap is even played. From the moment he arrived, Shedeur wasn't just a quarterback, he was a movement. The jerseys flew off shelves faster than the team could restock them. Highlight reels from his college days were played on loop across Cleveland sports bars. Fans who had sworn off the Browns, people who said never again after years of heartbreak, started creeping back, cautiously hopeful. And that's the key word, hopeful. Because Shedeur represented more than just talent. He represented a clean break from the endless cycle of mediocrity. Every great sports city has its chosen one, that player fans rally behind before the story's even written. For Cleveland, Shedeur was supposed to be that guy. His charisma, his swagger, the way he carried himself, it wasn't just about throwing touchdowns, it was about giving a city an identity again. Browns fans weren't just watching him, they were living through him, projecting all their frustration, all their hunger into his journey. And you could feel it building. Training camp crowds were larger, louder. Local radio couldn't go a single day without someone calling in to talk about Shedeur. Even national media started circling, asking if Cleveland had finally landed its franchise quarterback. For once, it felt like the Browns were on the right side of history. But here's where things get complicated. Because with every ounce of hype that built around Shedeur, the pressure started rising inside the building. And not everyone in the front office liked what they were seeing. Then came the announcement that turned excitation into outrage. After all the preseason hype, after all the buzz about Shedeur Sanders being the future, the Browns made their move. Jacoby Brissett would be the starter. Shedeur, benched. Not because of injury, not because of lack of talent, just benched. For Cleveland fans, it felt like the rug had been pulled out from under them. Imagine spending months believing you'd finally found the answer, only to be told you're getting the same recycled story you've heard for years. Fans weren't just disappointed, they were furious. Because this didn't feel like football logic, it felt like politics. Brissett is a steady veteran, sure. He knows how to run an offense, he won't make too many mistakes, and he can hold things together. But steady wasn't what Cleveland wanted. Fans weren't dreaming of stability, they were dreaming of transformation. They wanted to see the kid with fire in his eyes, the one who made defenders look silly in college, the one who had the potential to rewrite Cleveland's story. Instead, they handed them more of the same. And here's where the betrayal cuts deepest. Not only did Shedeur lose his chance, but the very people who should have had his back, the ones promising a new era, seemed to turn their backs on him before he ever got to prove himself. Reports started swirling that ownership wasn't comfortable with how much attention Shedeur was getting, that the hype around him was, quote, becoming a distraction. Think about that for a second. A franchise that's been starved for relevancy for decades, worried about too much attention? It doesn't add up.
To the fans, it looked less like a coaching decision and more like a power play. A move to keep control, to remind everyone who really calls the shots in Cleveland. And instead of feeling united, the fan base felt manipulated. The message was clear. The future you were promised, you're not getting it. Not now. Maybe not ever. And that's when the anger started turning into something much bigger. Because fans in Cleveland aren't stupid. They know football. And they knew this wasn't just about X's and O's. This was about control, and maybe even fear. Cleveland fans have been loyal through decades of disappointment. They've sat through blowouts in the freezing cold. They've endured quarterback after quarterback cycling through like it was a revolving door. And they've still filled the stadium out of sheer love for the team. But this time felt different. This wasn't just another bad season. This was a direct slap in the face. The reaction was immediate. Ticket resale markets started filling up as fans unloaded their seats in protest. Some season ticket holders, the most diehard of the diehard, announced they were done. They weren't going to show up to watch what they called the same recycled story. Stadium shots started circulating online of empty sections, the kind of visuals that sting ownership harder than any headline. And for the fans who did show up, they didn't come quietly. Signs demanding free Shedeur began popping up in the stands. Chants calling for Sanders echoed through games. Even when the Browns were on offense, it was chaos. Fans weren't just spectating anymore. They were actively rebelling. But it didn't stop at the stadium. Online, a movement was brewing. Hashtags like Free Shedeur and Let Him Play gained traction, flooding Browns Twitter, Instagram, and fan forums. Videos of Shedeur's college highlights racked up views as fans used them to prove their point. This wasn't just hype. He deserved the shot. Some fans even started circulating conspiracy theories, claiming ownership was purposely sabotaging Sanders to protect their older investments. Cleveland sports radio turned into a war zone. Callers lined up back to back, not to break down plays or analyze stats, but to vent, to accuse, to question why the team would bury the one player who gave fans hope. The anger was raw, unfiltered, and for once it wasn't directed at bad luck or a missed field goal. It was aimed squarely at the front office. And here's the thing about Cleveland fans. When they feel betrayed, they don't just move on. They dig in. This wasn't apathy. This was a revolt. And as the weeks went by, it became impossible to ignore. The Browns weren't just fighting their opponents on the field, they were fighting their own fans. And that's when whispers of something darker began to spread. That this wasn't just a football decision, but part of something much bigger. The revolt in the stands and online wasn't just about frustration. It was about suspicion. To Cleveland fans, the decision to sideline Shedeur Sanders didn't feel like football logic. It felt like something else entirely. And when football stops making sense, conspiracy theories start writing themselves. The whispers began with a simple question. Why bench the one player the city was rallying around? Coaches can talk about development and waiting for the right time, but that excuse fell flat. Fans have seen rookies thrown into the fire before, and many of them thrive. So why not Shedeur? That's when the talk turned to ownership. Reports started surfacing that Jimmy Haslam and the front office were uncomfortable with just how much attention Sanders was getting. Think about that for a moment. A team starved for relevance suddenly has a young quarterback who electrifies the fan base, and instead of celebrating it, they clamp down. Fans started to believe that Shedeur's charisma, his popularity, even his swagger, wasn't being viewed as an asset inside the building, it was being viewed as a threat. Some speculated that the Browns front office had too much invested, both financially and reputationally, in keeping veterans like Brissett at the forefront. Benching him would mean admitting mistakes, admitting wasted money, and admitting that the so-called long-term plan had failed. And if there's one thing front offices hate more than losing, it's admitting they were wrong. Others took it even further. They claimed this was collusion at the highest level, that Haslam didn't just want Shedeur off the field, he wanted him silenced. Why? Because Shedeur didn't fit the mold. He wasn't their guy, he wasn't part of their carefully constructed narrative. In a league where image and control matter just as much as wins, a player who could shift the power dynamic toward the fans might have been seen as dangerous. Now, whether or not these theories are true is impossible to say, but here's what's undeniable. The perception stuck. To the fans, every game Brissett started while Shedeur sat on the bench wasn't just a coaching decision. It was evidence. Evidence that something deeper, something darker was happening behind closed doors. And that perception began to do something the Browns never expected. It started dividing not just the fan base, but the team itself.
Players talk. They read the same headlines, scroll through the same social media posts, and hear the chants echoing from the crowd. And it didn't take long for whispers to spread. Some players quietly believed Shedeur should have been on the field. They'd seen what he could do in practice. They'd seen the arm strength, the mobility, the leadership flashes. To them, holding him back wasn't just puzzling. It felt like the team was shooting itself in the foot. But then there were the others, veterans who backed Jacoby Brissett, not just out of loyalty, but because they knew his style of play meant fewer risks. For players trying to secure contracts, safe and predictable can feel a lot more comfortable than the chaos of a rookie gunslinger. And so, the locker room started splitting into quiet camps, the ones who wanted the future and the ones clinging to the present. The coaching staff, meanwhile, was caught in the middle. On one side, pressure from ownership to keep the status quo. On the other, the undeniable energy around Sanders, both from fans and some of their own players. Imagine trying to game plan while half your team believes you're benching their best shot at winning. That kind of tension doesn't just disappear. It lingers, it festers, it eats away at the unity a team needs. And then there's the front office. For them, this wasn't about football at all. It was about power. Every game Sanders sat on the bench reinforced the idea that the suits upstairs were the ones in charge, not the players, not the coaches, and certainly not the fans. It was a message, but it was a dangerous one. Because every week the Browns refused to put Shedeur on the field, the louder the backlash grew. And the louder it grew, the more divided the building became. This wasn't just a football controversy anymore. It was something bigger, a tug-of-war between the old guard and the future, between those protecting their positions and those demanding change. And as the losses piled up, it became clear that the Browns weren't just losing games, they were losing their identity. And the scariest part? This civil war wasn't ending anytime soon. In fact, it was about to expose the one thing Cleveland fans feared most: that history was repeating itself all over again. At first glance, this entire saga looks like it's just about a quarterback controversy. A rookie benched, a veteran starting, fans upset. But when you pull back, you realize this is bigger than just Shedeur Sanders. This is about the Browns themselves and the cycle they can't seem to escape. Cleveland is a city that's lived through some of the most painful moments in sports history. From the drive to the fumble, from draft busts to wasted seasons, the Browns have always seemed one step away from turning the corner, only to trip over their own feet. And every single time, the common thread has been the same: leadership. Ownership and front offices making decisions that don't just confuse the fans, they alienate them. That's why Shedeur's benching hit so hard. Because to fans, it wasn't just a rookie being told to wait his turn. It was the Browns repeating history. It was the same old pattern of self-sabotage. The team finally stumbles into a player with the talent, charisma, and potential to spark a new era, and instead of leaning in, they pull back. They protect their past mistakes instead of betting on their future. And here's the haunting part. This isn't just about wins and losses. It's about identity.
Every city that loves its football team knows that the quarterback isn't just a player, he's a symbol. He represents what the franchise stands for. By keeping Shedeur on the bench, the Browns sent a message, whether they meant to or not, that control and politics matter more than hope and change. It's why the fans revolted. It's why the conspiracy theories gained traction. Because deep down, people in Cleveland weren't just angry about one decision. They were angry about decades of the same story, playing out in new ways. Shedeur Sanders was supposed to be the clean break from the curse, and instead, his benching became proof that the curse is alive and well. So when Jimmy Haslam complains that fans aren't all in, maybe he's missing the point. Because fans were ready to be all in. They were ready to believe. But how do you stay loyal to a franchise that keeps ripping away the very hope it asks you to cling to? And that leads us to the question every Browns fan is asking right now. Is this really about protecting the team, or is it about protecting their own failure? And that brings us to the one question hanging over Cleveland like a storm cloud. How much longer can this last? Because right now, the Browns aren't just fighting opponents on Sundays. They're fighting themselves. Ownership versus fans, veterans versus rookies, short-term safety versus long-term vision. And caught right in the middle is Shedeur Sanders, the one player who could unify this fractured fan base, the one player who could flip the script. But here's the truth that nobody in Berea wants to admit. This can't go on forever. The chants are only going to get louder. The frustration is only going to grow. And every game Sanders doesn't play, the Browns lose more than just yards or points. They lose their soul. So the Browns are standing at a crossroads. They can double down on silence, politics, and power plays, or they can do what their fans have begged them to do for generations. Let hope back onto the field. Because if they don't, then this won't just be another wasted season. It'll be the moment Cleveland realizes the curse was never bad luck at all. It was always self-inflicted. And maybe, just maybe, the scariest part of this entire saga is that deep down, the Browns already know it. So the real cliffhanger isn't if Shedeur Sanders will play, it's when. And by the time he finally steps on that field, will it be too late to save the season and the franchise itself?